In today's conversation, I am joined by the Twitter personality and YouTuber Latter-day Saint Peregrine. We discuss music, testimonies, conspiracy theories, being critical but open, influence of media, politics, religion, and much more. If it wasn't for our schedules, this could have easily been a 5-hour conversation, as you soon will hear. We hope you enjoy the very sporadic and riff-like flow, as we certainly did. If you haven't done so, please go subscribe to Latter-day Saint Peregrine on YouTube and give him a follow on Twitter. With them, we'll probably have another one in the future. I actually reached out to a guy. We're having a very interesting podcast conversation. He's an Islamic financial advisor. And so I thought a lot about how there's certain rules there could be applicable to a lot of members or just people of other faiths. An investment strategy that makes you feel comfortable because you're not, funding companies that, like investing in an alcohol company might not sit right. And I felt like the conversation, kind of a high shot. He's very well renowned. I've shared some of his stuff before. So I was as shocked when he was like, oh, yeah, sure. This sounds great. We'll be doing it. And I was just like, so
that's cool.
Definitely appreciate you doing this.
No worries. No, it's fine. I've been talking about it for a while. I'm trying to get my YouTube channel up and running. I've got a couple videos in the works. And I've done some interviews with other people for my YouTube channel that I haven't released yet. But yeah, like I'm going to be getting my YouTube channel up and running, and so I want to do as many discussions as I can. I want to talk to as many people as I can. So this is great.
Something I'm actually going through a writing class right now, and I've been studying and researching how to podcast. Not from those dudes who just do YouTube channels. I don't really trust them. I've been going around looking at all sorts of different articles over the years, and then people that review successful podcasting channels. And something that I've applied from Joe Rogan is, in his comedy thing, he records and writes down everything he talks about. And so something I've done is I've done a podcasting journal. So any thoughts and ideas I have, how I went about stuff, or things I might want to say, or topics, I can record it in there. And then when stuff works or doesn't work, I can kind of see where I'm going. So I would suggest that simple Word document, whatever it is. But
yeah, because I was thinking of doing like starting streaming and just streaming like 3 nights a week, just like chatting with the audience, maybe getting some people on to talk to, things like that. So yeah, that'd actually probably be a good practice, because if I'm going to be doing it fairly regularly, then I want to make sure I'm saying the right things and not misrepresenting my own point of view and things like that. So yeah.
I hate to admit it, but I am my number one listener on my podcast metrics. There's a dude in Japan who's listening to all my stuff. But I've listened to the episodes several times. I can kind of see and tweak the narrations of the blogs and stuff. And one of the things I've noticed was you probably should get a better microphone, because I sounded like I was talking in a fishbowl. So
yeah,
obviously you're aware. So
yeah,
progress step by step. But I saw your YouTube channel. It was pretty cool. You got your testimony on there, and then it wasn't really shown, but I saw this like My Music thing, and I found your Bandcamp, and I was actually pretty amazed that there's some more people out there doing music. I don't know how recent that is.
Yeah, so that music there is I actually my main hobby, the thing that I do the most in my free time, is music. And I have an artist that I am running. I'm not sure I'm willing to reveal what artist it is yet, but where I make dubstep and dance music and stuff like that. The one that I've got linked on my YouTube page is to an ambient thing that I haven't really released any music in a year or so, but I might release some more music on there. And I'm also working on an album under the name of my YouTube channel, Peregrine. So I'm working on an album of LDS themed rap music or hip hop or pop music or whatever you would classify it as, inspired by Leland. but definitely my own style, because I've been producing music since I was 16. So, and I went to university to do music production. So, yeah, that's my passion. I love making music, and especially dance music. I feel like that's just something that flows out of me very naturally. Is like yeah. So anyway,
I admire that. Growing up, I used to sing all the time. Like my mom would just, hey, keep it down. I was just always singing. I did well in choir. And then I saw a violin and wanted to play it. And so I ended up playing violin, actually made it to second chair. And the orchestra instructor was like, let's move you to first. And I was like, I don't think you know how I play. I'm listening off of what the first chair does. So probably not. So I peaked at second chair. So if first chair was out, I would be first. And I was like, oh, way to put me on. There was a musical that we did of Aladdin, and I ended up singing and doing some violin in there. And then I don't know what happened, but we moved from that house, and then I went through puberty. I sound like my cat Haru right now, going through heat. And I can't keep a note, which was really hard through military training. Trying to keep a beat has been very, very hard. I'm more inclined lyrically to write lyrics for somebody that can actually sing and do it well. So I definitely admire that.
Yeah, I mean, I was a theater kid growing up. I did musicals all through primary school and high school, and I did choir all through high school, and I loved it. I'd actually like to. I'm going to be going back to uni next year, so it would be great to join one of the university choirs and start doing that kind of stuff again, because I do love singing, and I do sing in some of my own music, although none of that is released yet. But yeah, one day. The Peregrine album is the main one that like I'm really hyped about, because that's me rapping, it's me singing, it's I've produced the whole thing, I've written the whole thing, so that's the one that I'm most excited about. My EDM is just I always make that. That's just kind of like always churning in the background, but I can't help but make that kind of music. But yeah.
In my opinion, I think music is one of the most forgiving mediums of critique. A genre that I was really into, I've kind of backed away from, was called deathcore. Came from metalcore. Basically, super guttural lyric. Anybody who's not listened to it before, most of the lyrics are about like demons possessing and hell and opening up and being trapped there. So somebody who is very, very apostate and just super angry, it fit really well. I mainly enjoyed the alien invasion ones and the end of the world stuff. There's some good songs out there, but some of them are just pretty terrible to listen to.
I mean, I got really into metal in high school because I was an atheist, as you know, having watched my YouTube video. I was an atheist in high school, and I was really, really into metal. Got really into Slipknot, and then, got into Bring Me the Horizon, stuff like that, which then ended up leading to, early Bring Me the Horizon's quite deathcore-y. So then that ended up leading me into bands like, I think it was Angel Maker and bands like that. And I just got really into, like Born of Osiris and bands like that. So I got really into deathcore and music like that in high school. But I don't really listen to music like that anymore. After joining the church, it kind of got hard to listen to music like that. But I do listen to metal music that's very epic and kind of fantastical. I love power metal. I love like Sabaton, and I love like Powerwolf and bands like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel. Although I lost my gift at voice, I practiced very hard. I'm a little out of touch right now, but I really got down the gutturals for deathcore and was really pushing in. Before I came to Japan, I was actually we were trying to like get a band together just for fun. I got a drummer and a bassist, and we were just trying to find a guitarist, which really was not supposed to be that hard because everyone should play guitar. Just everyone who was a guitar player just was busy or whatever. But something I was really trying to push was I wanted to get a country singer because I had this vision of soft country lyrics and then using the angst of like the music behind it. Instead of the country singer bemoaning that, it would be the death gutturals that would flow into there, and then you could tell like this wild wild west story. This guy comes across whatever. So I thought that would be very interesting. And the
I
problem
think
was
there's a
like
market there.
the market is probably like me. So it's hard. And again, I think that's the fun part.
To be honest though, that look, I have friends who are really into that kind of Wild West vibe. Maybe more, it might be more of a thing maybe in the south of America and in Australia, maybe more in Western Australia where it's all, you know, country stuff. But yeah, I can see some people liking that. Australia's got a huge metal scene as well.
Oh yeah. You said that and my brain's dumping, but I've listened to a lot of guys because you can tell when they're doing the show afterwards, they're not American, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of great
big in Europe.
Feeder to the Sharks is probably one of my favorite Australian bands that just disappeared.
Yeah. There's also a really huge, because my main genre in making EDM is dubstep. Mm-hmm. There's a huge dubstep scene in Australia. It's probably one of the most popular EDM genres, maybe the most popular EDM genre. You know, they put on these like rhythm shows or death step shows, and literally just you get thousands of young people turning up, and the tickets sell out in like a week, and it's amazing. And this is in a small city like Perth. So
well, look at how Tones and I got started. She's straight. I want to say she's from Perth, and she started doing.
I don't remember. I don't know, to be honest.
She started doing that. What's that term you guys call it when people are out on the street, like just trying to make some money?
Busking.
Yeah, she was a busker, and that's where she got started. And I think the song that took her off was "Dance for Me." I think that's one that. Yeah. She's wild. She's just setting up in the street, and all of a sudden there's like 400 people outside doing an EDM concert, and there's just like some person trying to enjoy their their little shop, boutique ice cream, and there's just ravers out in the street. So definitely good luck on that.
It's good fun. I wouldn't say there's much room for making money in EDM, but if I got into DJing, maybe I could, but at the moment it's just more of a hobby, and we'll see where it takes me.
I have a friend that was really pushing into that, and I feel like he saw how hard it is in EDM with how many musicians are out there, or DJs, and he just kind of felt, I take better photographs than I do mix songs. But he still mix songs, but his music content and stuff, I think he does side gigs and stuff because he has all the equipment and doesn't want to waste it, so he uses that. But I think you can definitely find that genre.
Yeah. Like that is a concern though with EDM, is just there is so many artists making music. There are so many people making music because the barrier to entry is very low, and the ceiling, like the skill ceiling for how far you can push your craft is extremely high, possibly higher than many other genres, because the genres are so technical and because they're so based on engineering and like really minute audio differences between sounds and things like that. So, skill ceiling, so like barrier to entry very low, skill ceiling very high, means that a lot of people think they can do it, and so they jump in, and you end up with just thousands of artists, and it's just completely oversaturated. And it's very and it's hard to make a name for yourself.
And that's kind of where you can see where somebody has that drive, that willingness to succeed at all costs. When you're in such an oversaturated market and you see them continuing to do that.
I've been doing it for over 3 years now, making dance music. So I'm the sort of person though where I just can't help it. I just love making that kind of music. I don't even listen to it that much. I just love making that kind of music. And I it's just my subconscious just I just sit down and I can just make a song in a couple hours, and I'm always churning out songs. So
what's your take on Kaleidoscope?
Kaleidoscope. I don't know what is this, a band or an artist or?
Yeah. What I want to say it's Kaleidoscope. Hold on, let me pull up that Apple Music here. He's actually a member of the church.
Oh, nice.
It's just really interesting because he's always doing it's like they can't figure out to ask him a different question, but they're like, how come you're not? Oh, Cascade.
Yeah. I know Cascade.
He's wild. He's sitting there doing that, and there's artists doing things of
Is he
Babylon.
a member of the church? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that every time he gets interviewed,
I'm going to follow him just because of that.
Yeah, he gets interviewed, and they're like, "So how come you're not dropping acid?" And he was like, "Look, I'm a member of the church. It's something we don't do." And it's like, bro, everyone's asked him that. Like, come on, please stop.
Yeah. Like that's one thing I really wanted to do, is I really wanted to be an example in the scene. This is why I want to start doing DJ shows, is because I just don't. I want to be an example for young people, to be like, you can actually be in this scene and not take drugs literally every hour, And
then I feel like the other thing,
sad.
If you've seen any of my interactions, I'm kind of very pro drug, just because I feel like if you're an adult, you should be able to determine whether or not you should want to take it, right? There's also some to it, and I feel like
go on.
With the prevalence of everyone using stuff as party stuff, it devalues some of the sacredness that some of these typical party drugs have been associated with. And so for people who are trying to do it for religious reasons or to better themselves or to, deal with PTSD or whatever the good research is showing from like Johns Hopkins University, when you get a bunch of people doing stupid stuff and drugging it, it just kind of like makes people look bad. And then you get the mindset of, you can have fun unless you're completely obliterated. So
so I'll put my opinion in the ring, which is I don't have. So when it comes to hallucinogens, specifically all natural hallucinogens, all I'll say about it is that I reserve judgment on all natural hallucinogens. I don't know enough about them. I've never used them, and I've heard from various people that they're fine. I've heard from other people that they're very bad. So I'm just going to reserve judgment on those. But I think the kind of engineered drugs that are the drugs that are laced with a whole bunch of stuff that you don't know what it is, drugs like marijuana outside of medicinal purposes, cocaine, a lot of those drugs that are already illegal, my opinion is that they should remain illegal. And I do believe that to an extent we do actually know what's best for people, and there are some things that just shouldn't be legal, and that would make society worse if they were legal. But I don't know if it was you I had an argument with, but I had an argument with someone about this on Twitter, because someone said you can't legislate morality, and that was me. That was you, yeah. And I had an argument with you over it. But I genuinely do believe that to an extent we do know what's best for people, and we should legislate morality the same way we legislate killing, the same way we legislate taxation, the same way we legislate things like that. It's like, the same way the force and use of violence is monopolized in the hands of the state, which is the way it has to be. Anyway, but that's my view on it. I'm not I'm pro legalization of some things. I'm not pro legalization of everything. I am generally pretty libertarian, pretty freedom focused, but I'm not a full blown libertarian, and I'm not even sure I would call myself a conservative. So, but I'm definitely a traditionalist conservative, social conservative. But
yeah, it was really interesting, the conversation, and then you're like, I'm like, that's completely irrelevant. I'm in Australia, and I was like, oh crap, totally not relevant. They have their own struggles going on. Like Australia has decided to download new Plague of the Month,
Yeah.
I feel real sorry for those poor farmers, and you just, oh, the field's moving. That wave of mice is eating it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. We have our own problems, and so I generally, yeah, and one thing is that I don't know if this is a problem in America. I know you guys have had the I don't I don't know enough about American like drug stuff to speak on it, but in Australia, drugs is a big issue. Um it's a really big social ill in our country. It actually it the use of specifically meth in Australia. I think Sydney is the meth capital of the world, and yeah, our meth use is just really really bad, and it usually goes along the lines of someone tries out marijuana, they like it, they're in a group of friends, they go to the dealer and they buy marijuana off that dealer, and then they get into a culture of using marijuana. But then of course if you have drug cultures, then they're going to overlap with other drug cultures, so you end up, they meet someone who is doing another drug and they're like, oh well, marijuana was fine, so I'll try another one. And so they end up trying all these drugs, and then meth of course is the most addictive of all of them, and then we end up with this whole group of people who are not just young people, but people of all ages, in all strata of society. No one is safe. Of course, it hits poor people harder, but no one is safe from the addiction, and it's just terrible. It rips families apart. It causes crime. It's just, yeah, it's awful in Australia. It's really bad.
So I used to be very strict conservative against it. I don't know how my opinion changed. I guess it was just exposure to different ideas and how things work around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And having family that's been law enforcement and friends that are still law enforcement, you're very true. A lot of what is happening is people that live in states that have not legalized stuff all the way. They have to rely on these drug dealers. And a lot of these drug dealers are getting products that are marketed and coming from the cartels, or they're coming from China. And then they will initially push simple stuff to get people addicted to higher other things. And then you have the whole fentanyl crisis where they're cutting that into everything, and you can't really trust it. So I'm more of a believer that you should be able to, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearm regulation should be a store, and you should be able to go get that and know it's safe because you have that right to make that choice. And we're just kind of putting these people in these boxes, and I feel like we're doing more harm than good, especially in my experience. The state I'm from in the U.S. is Colorado. I want to say when I was living in Colorado Springs, it was the meth capita of the United States. They made more meth than the next 10 cities. It was ridiculous. I had a girl that was pretty much harassing me on a daily basis. Come to find out, her parents were running a meth lab. One day she didn't show up to school, and we're like, what's going on? Oh yeah, you didn't hear her trailer exploded. The sheriff's department raided her, and she's off in child custody somewhere. So
yeah, like I do understand all that, and I'm not the sort of person who will say that drugs need to, like, that just ownership of drugs needs to be a prison offense or even a fine. I think we need to have effective state-run rehabilitation centers that should be compulsory to attend if you are caught using these specifically hard drugs. We have a rehabilitation center in Australia, in Western Australia, which is extremely effective. It's the most effective rehabilitation center, I believe, in Australia, and it's privately owned. And the guy has been trying to get funding for it. He's been trying to get the government to give him anything, but they just refused to help him out. And they actually sued him on multiple times. The government's trying to shut his place down because they want to have a state-run monopoly on rehabilitation centers. And they didn't want him doing what he was doing because he was doing it so much better than they were and making them look bad. So they were trying to shut him down. They sued him multiple times. He spent like 5 to 6 years in lawsuits or something. Anyway, point is, I think, even private rehabilitation centers would be a good idea as well. But just having rehabilitation centers that are compulsory for people who are doing drugs, that doesn't mean legalizing them. It doesn't mean saying like, oh, this, like, it's like the government says this is absolutely fine. But like, certainly I can see the argument for drug regulation, especially for some of those less harmful substances that I can see possibly. But I can't for something like meth, I can't see the argument with the government allowing it, because anything that the government allows is an implicit endorsement of that. So yeah. That's my view, is that like it doesn't have to be prison time. It doesn't have to be the death penalty or even a fine. It can just be rehabilitation. So
I would say in my experience, I personally don't care about even the hard drug offenders. My biggest thing is I've seen more families destroyed by alcohol. I see that as a greater prevalent. How many drunk drivers are, driving in the U.S., families being killed from there, taken away from their loved ones for their choices. Whereas finding somebody who's smoked marijuana, what is the crime to that? So it's definitely like one of those topics you be on all day and kind of talking to somebody that kind of changed my idea of their perspective. The comedian Russell Brand, he's actually kind of reaching out and doing those.
Him.
Yeah.
Well, he was the one who convinced me. It was one of his documentaries basically convinced me that imprisoning drug offenders doesn't work. And I think that's probably true. Imprisoning drug offenders doesn't work, but that doesn't mean that we have to make them legal and then regulate them. It could just mean fine. I think there are other ways. Like I said, rehabilitation. I need to think more about this, but that's one alternative that I can think of. I did. There was one other thing I was going to say, but I've forgotten. Oh, I was going to say on alcohol. I mean, this is another thing I'm going to have to think through, because I haven't really thought about this very much. But I'm not like, if there was a candidate, if there was a party or there was a candidate who was running on a platform of prohibition, I wouldn't say no. Because alcohol is a big problem in Australia as well. Drinking, over drinking, binge drinking, alcoholism, it's a big problem. So I don't know if I would even be anti-prohibition of alcohol.
With the last conversation, number 2, with Elliot, we were talking about the word of wisdom. I was just kind of pondering in the car, listening to that again, mainly to see how I can improve and talk about, and then also, trying to see what I can feel and get out of it. And something I was thinking about was how many people struggle with, getting a caramel macchiato. Imagine if we followed the word of wisdom as it is. There would be so many home wine bibblers. It would be insane. Like, everyone would be making their own wines. Like, it's okay, it's my own wine. Like, okay, yeah, let's pull out the test kit. How much alcohol per volume do you got going on, sir? There'd be so many winos. It would just the temptation is too strong with alcohol, and it's very rare to find somebody who can just have a glass. I judge my coworkers when I go out to parties and I see how they drink alcohol. That's how I judge them for the rest of the time. The person who can pour a glass of alcohol and that's it, I trust them over somebody who's going beer after beer after beer. Because, like, what are you trying to do? There's so many bad things that come from that. Come on.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I can absolutely see that. I mean, I'm fairly similar. I don't know. Look, I'm maybe I'm a little bit more judgmental on this particular issue because I don't know. Were you raised in the church?
I hate using that word. I don't think we should use convert and, born in the church anymore. We all have to be converted. But yes, in the traditional sense, I joined, growing up.
Well, the difference is, I suppose, that if you're born in the church / raised in the church, you probably are more likely to have a more protected upbringing when it comes to things like alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. Whereas if you're a convert, it's more likely you have experiences with things like that.
Yeah, my snippety parts on those individuals who are born in the church and they feel like that gives them an authoritarian view on everything. And so,
I
my
have a friend who's like
grandpappy
that.
pushed the cart all the way to Utah. Cool. So what is
I have
your
a
faith
friend
and
who,
test?
man, I have a friend who when because I'm very devout. I'm I'm very I talk about my faith probably more than anything else. And that may come from being a convert because it's so new to me, it's so different for me. I just talk about it all the time. So I did this like 3-day marathon of Star Wars recently. And I one of the friends that I sat through it with, he was the only one who stuck with me for the whole thing. He's my best friend. He's a great guy. He's been a member of the church his whole life. But like every time I bring up anything to do with the church, he's like, "Oh, for goodness sake, here we go again." Off on one of his rants about the church, and you're appropriating my culture. But he's funny. He's funny. But yeah, I have noticed that is a thing.
So I don't know, like my family really wasn't raised. I don't remember. I remember going to church. I have this very strong memory of my family taking me to, I want to say a Protestant church. It happened to be Palm Sunday. We were doing the things like went and tucked green construction paper and we all made palms and then put a fake beard and hair and then, put this guy on the back of this like wooden donkey thing and pulled him through the door. But my grandmother was more religious and I saw religion through there. And then we went to churches for weddings and funerals.
Yep. Yeah.
Other than that,
my parents were much more like active members of our local Protestant church. So we would go every week. Plus we would go on Christmas morning and we would go, we would do weddings, we would do funerals, we would go on Easter morning. No matter how we would go Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and I think also Easter Saturday. We would go to church very often, and so I was raised in that kind of an environment. So yeah,
I think your upbringing has such a huge impact on you. I think the biggest thing I got was open-mindedness, which is really weird because if I were to have this conversation with my mom, I guarantee she would disagree. And if she listens to this later, she's probably going to call me about it. But I really learned to kind of look at things and try not to have such a hard set opinion because you may be wrong. So anything I say today, tomorrow I might experience something that might change it. I don't want to set myself in stone and make generalizations and live like that.
Well, I'm similar, although there are some things that I'm very certain of, and there are some things that I am. But most of what I believe is very it's able to change. It's able to change. The reason why I asked that question though about your upbringing was one thing about being raised in Australia where I am. Because Australia is, I think, more than 50% atheist now. It's basically an atheist country. And I've seen a lot of alcohol abuse, and I haven't seen a lot of drug abuse, like illegal drug abuse. I've seen prescription drug abuse. I've seen a lot of things. So maybe that impacts emotionally the way I view the topic. So that's just why I brought that up. It may have something to do with, how, like, where I live and how I've been raised. So
yeah, I just kind of let that our little back and forth kind of go away and simmer down. Not that I felt that you were angry, but I felt like we were both excited about our points and we wanted to talk about who's right and who is wrong. But I kind of got this feeling that maybe there was something in your life that you experienced that gave you such strong things, and it's probably better to be quiet and go do something else.
Well, I don't know if you know much about personality, but I have, in personality traits, I have quite a high tendency towards disgust. I have a very kind of black and white way of seeing the world, and it's just a natural thing for me. And I am very quick to judge people, and I'm very quick to think that something is wrong, and I'm very slow to think that something is okay. And that's it's something I've had to work on in regards to judging people too harshly. But that is just a part of my personality I have to work with. So that may also have something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm one of those NITJs types.
Yeah.
I joke all the time. I'm a capital A autistic, but I'm in the military, so I can't be.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of things where
I wouldn't have called it, to be honest.
yeah. I can see certain things. I just have no idea what's going on. It makes no sense to me. I'm really terrible. If you were to say good day to me, I'm like, I'm just really bad learning social things.
Yeah.
My wife, bless her heart, has put up with that. I've learned there's certain interactions to do. But when it comes to talking to people about certain subjects, I am as charismatic as you can be. I'm like Leland, not giving a crap, making music for myself. I get that passionate about it. So I don't know why. It's like I'm introvert. And then you bring up motorcycle racing and the current Moto E restrictions, and then you better sit down because you're gonna learn a lot more than you ever thought you would on a topic.
I'm like that with the church and with certain topics within politics, especially social issues. I get very, very passionate, which is why I started my Twitter account, and it's why I want to start my YouTube channel and do stuff like that, because I can talk for hours about these issues and I don't get riled up, and I don't really like I can have a fairly spirited debate and a fairly spirited discussion, and I won't take any of it personally. I'm just, for me it's good fun. So
I don't want to do that because I don't want to feel like I'm living in high school. But downstairs in my closet, I want to say I have around 25-ish trophies. In high school, I lettered in debate. I would have made it to nationals, but I was Manchestered to end a debate with, and I'm too drunk to taste this chicken. And so I said, I'm not a coward. And I said that, and the judge looked at me and wrote on her paper, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to nationals now. So I definitely have that whole experience of actually how to debate and stuff. So it's funny when people want to throw around on Twitter like I'm using straw man arguments, and I'm like, I'm actually using a hasty generalization. If you'd known your fallacies. I don't know if you saw my spat going off. I commented about bugs, and there's this idea that Christians are making it, you're evil if you eat bugs. And I'm like, I'm tired of seeing this connection. So I just kind of typed out a message about how, according to Paulinian gospel, we can eat bugs. It's fine. Shut up.
Yeah. I think I don't know about the people you were saying in particular. I know that the general feeling that I'm getting from a lot of people in the conservative right is that they're feeling very, very apprehensive and scared about the possibility of actually having to eat bugs because of the way that the country is going in America. And so and they're very angry that they're going to have to be forced to do that. And so when people come along and say, oh, come on, it's not that bad to do it, they just see that as you shouldn't be worried about this thing that, I think you're fairly justified in being worried about, something like economics or something like the state of the country. So I think that's where that comes from. Is it's kind of this.
I cynically laugh at it because it's like, oh, a conservative, you actually care about someone's self-autonomy? Funny.
Yeah.
But I definitely. So I want to caveat that there could be a New World Order propaganda, and that I don't really buy the whole New World Order conspiracy I think with the advent of the internet, any plans that they had have been thrown out the window because some person can take a phone call or video and record it, and everyone sees it now. There is I am seeing a lot more chatter on actual legitimate research sites about, Americans should adapt and use bugs. There's a whole bunch of evidence that shows it makes more sense. It's fine. The problem is Americans' culture. We eat beef, chicken, pork, and then occasionally we go to Red Lobster and we eat sea bug. And so when it comes to anything else than that, it's really gross. Like if you were to take somebody from the, New York upper state and then take them to the South to a crawfish boil, and you explain that you just an hour ago went to a river and scooped up all these crawdads, they're going to be grossed out by it.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I know much about the bug thing. It's not really something I particularly care about, although I can imagine if my country was in as bad financial shape as America looks like it's going to be going in, I might be more worried about it. But I'm not that worried about it. But on the New World Order stuff, maybe not specifically New World Order, but secret combinations in high places. I could talk about that for a long time.
I'm not saying that I don't believe that there are secret combinations. It's clear and obvious. Like we lost a U.S. president because he didn't mesh. JFK was shot because he was trying to do a whole bunch of stuff, and people in power didn't like it.
And you lost one fairly recently because people in power didn't like it as well.
Because you can't control them. I think Joe Rogan said it best. When he's all hopped up on Adderall, there's no man on earth that can keep him from saying some stuff. And then the everyday Joe, who is angered and tired of being put down by the politicians, had a angry, quote, asshole that was going to be the leader. And it was okay to say things that were wrong, that you would never say in public. And he was doing it. And so he gave them an out. And
some things that are right that no one else is allowed to say, and that no one is allowed to say because it goes against the plan.
I don't know if you saw my thread on this, but I have a theory, and every day it's kind of proved more. With how hard President Trump fought to keep his taxes withheld, there's something. You don't fight that hard for no reason. And what it was showing was how incredibly in debt he was and how his business model failed. His business model was, I am Donald Trump. For the longest time in his life, he would always side with the Democrats. He was always siding with what they were doing. He was, kissing up to them, always doing these things. I think he got to a point to realize he was going to hit financial bankruptcy. He built his family up to live to a certain status. And I don't know if it was him or somebody came to him with this idea of running as a conservative and being yourself and this personality and building the Trump name up. And look at where it got him. It got him into the White House, which to everyone
it did.
Said, no, that can't happen. But it did.
But he did lose a substantial amount of money in doing that. Over the course of the presidency, he ended up losing a lot of money. And now it seems like he's pursuing a full-time career basically in politics, which is definitely pays less than the job he was originally in. So
again, his name, that's why he fought so hard to put his name on everything, because he's about, his buildings, his hotels. So I really feel like,
he's definitely a narcissist. He's definitely a narcissist. I genuinely think he thought, first of all, he saw that there were major problems with American society and with Western civilization, and he genuinely believed that he could be the savior of America, or that he could be the savior of Western civilization. And so it was definitely narcissistic, but I don't think he was dishonest about it. I think he genuinely thought he was doing a good thing, and he thought that he could do it. But I think I think the system was too much for him to stand up against, and I think he ended up. This is what we saw in the later part of his presidency. Was that he couldn't get anything done. He ended up being anyway. I won't get into the nitty gritty of politics, but that's what I genuinely think.
You can actually go and see where he was just fighting to the end. But he definitely changed American politics forever. And I think he changed world politics forever. I think Trump was a wake-up call to these individuals who are like, this is the system, this is how we do it, this is the way it'll be. And then all of a sudden you have a guy like Trump going into office, and suddenly people are looking around like, uh-oh. So for those people going through political science in a couple of years, they're going to have some fun conversations in class at uni. So, and what's funny is during his presidency in the military, I can't talk anything bad about the president because I literally be punished for it.
Yep.
I just loved his personality. He literally could take something as simple as I'm going to legalize marijuana, and because it would make sense of the revenue and stuff to do it, but because he said it, you would see the opposite effect. Everyone would come out of the woodwork about how evil and terrible it was. This man could be like, everyone's buying electric cars tomorrow. And then everyone would be like, this is why you're not buying an electric car. And Donald Trump is, it was just like, why is there such a concerted effort to where anything he says is wrong? Is like,
Yep.
let people decide for themselves if what he said is true.
It made the media hysterical. It made the whole system hysterical because they didn't know what to do with him, and they couldn't control him, and they couldn't they couldn't put the reins on him. And I think they were genuinely terrified. And that's why we ended up getting what we did in the most recent election. I don't know if you've heard about the recent stuff that's happened in Georgia in regards to the investigation into the ballots. But that has been,
that's all American news.
That's been extremely interesting. And I, as an Australian, I can also say that there is a great deal of corruption and secret combinations in my country as well, which makes me extremely upset because I thought this was an American thing, but apparently not. Apparently it's an international thing. So it makes me very annoyed.
I can't remember.
The transnational corporations control my country as well.
It's really sad when you go and look at simple things. Lobbyists have ruined so much. There was a guy who showed how the American voice is not heard because there's 30 different lobbyists who are going around, and pretty much you're not going to have whatever you want to go through a policy platform. Like, say you want to give every family a dog for free. There's a lobbyist group that doesn't like that idea, and they're going to push and push and push and push to where it doesn't look like that. And then you see that, like, corporatism, I think, is the biggest infection. And I'm more concerned about corporatism than I am about like a new world order. These corporations.
I am too, and I don't think it's just corporate interests though. I think it's foreign interests as well. I think it's Saudi Arabia, it's Israel, it's China, it's Russia. Now China and Russia, I don't think they're as big a problem as what people say they are. But there are countries around the world that have great lobbying power and a great deal of financial power. And they can and they do change politics within a country simply because they want to. And it happens in America. It happens in Australia. I mean, America does the same thing with other countries. Let's not pretend that America's like some glowing paragon of virtue in this regard. America does the same thing. I don't know if my country does the same thing. I'd have to look into it. But in regards to lobbying in foreign states and things like that. I know the CIA does it in America. They do a lot of meddling in foreign elections and things like that. So, it's just a whole big mess. It's a whole big mess, and we have to stop it. We either have to stop it or accept that the end times are here and Jesus Christ is coming soon. So
that's why I get mad at people saying that eating bugs are evil. I'm like, there's definitely bigger fish in the ocean that are more important concerns than whether or not
fish in the ocean.
Eating a cicada truffle, like, have you heard about the Black Rock Gate? They're calling it Black Rock Gate.
I don't know anything about it, but I've heard of it. Some of the political commentators I watch have mentioned it.
So for listeners, this is pretty much corporatism at its max. A investment company called BlackRock has kind of figured out how to continually make profit. And so what they're doing is they're going into brand new developments of houses, and they're buying every single house and they're renting them out as a single family home, to where what they're doing is they're securing their future dividends to their stockholders, and they're removing the Americans' ability to generate equity wealth from their estate, because that's the number one way to generate wealth in the U.S. is through your estate and gaining equity in your home. And so by doing that, it's pretty much preventing Americans to do that. I wasn't able to verify it, but I saw some things about how this company may or may not be behind the tiny house movement. They're really trying to push into all these different things. And I'm just like, there's so much wicked stuff just to get the bottom dollar. It's insane how much stuff is out there.
Well, it's power. It's a corruption of power. Everything you see the world do, everything you see Babylon do, is a perversion and a corruption of gospel principles. Money is a corruption of the principle of priesthood power. Power is a corruption of the idea of priesthood power. You see it with all sorts of things. The one thing I wanted to say was the other big problem with lobbying is the hyper elite. The people in the top 1% of the 1%, who literally earn hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of a few years. And they are, they have hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth that they own. And so we talk about billionaires and taxing rich people more, right? For someone who has $2 billion, donating $500 million to a political campaign seems like too much money. They can't really do it. But someone with $200 billion is much more able to donate $500 million to a political campaign and basically swing the election on the basis of that donation, because that's such an enormous amount of money. So there's that big problem in the US as well. And I think this is this specific thing is like the hyper rich is a big problem in Australia as well, their lobbying power. There's a what was I going to say? That's right. So we see, for example, Biden's tax policy where he says no one's going to receive extra tax if you're earning over 400,000 a year. That's the cutoff, right? If you're earning below 400,000 a year, you're not going to be taxed more. But then the point is, like, 400,000 a year is not that rich. That's like moderately wealthy. That's not like, that's not like hugely rich. Whereas there's people who earn hundreds of billions of dollars every few years, and they're not paying any tax. So let's look at exactly like how this is going to play out. So you're going to tax people who are in the like a middle upper to lower stratum of society higher, meaning that it's less likely and it's harder for someone to move from the lower strata up because they have to pay more money to the government every step of the way. It makes it actually harder to move up. And then you have the people at the very top aren't paying any tax. That just sounds to me like some kind of version of feudalism, or it's by definition it's cronyism. So it's like, let's actually try and like get the people who are making the most enormous amount of money paying. Doesn't even have to be that much tax. Just tax would be good. Just paying tax would be good.
There's a surfism that goes with it. Do you remember there was an American CEO? His name is Dan Price. He decided. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. It's 7 p.m., so families are getting home and they're watching TV right now, so my internet speed's going down. Anyway, as I was, Dan Price was the CEO that decided he wasn't going to take all that extra money and pocket. He decided every one of his employees, no matter what they did, would earn the same price. And there was literal lobbying about how retarded this man was and saying his company was going to go up in flames and he was going to be on the street homeless and how stupid he is. He's still there. He's still there. They actually have behavioral scientists studying the employees and research. I had another account. I kind of interacted with some people within the DesNat and LDS circle. But UBI, I'm a firm believer that we need to get to that because of automation and the threat it did. And so I was really one of those who actually financially supported Andrew Yang. I didn't believe in all of his platform, but I really felt like he's the only one saying something that made sense. We need to worry about this. And the whole, why would we pay more taxes? It doesn't make sense. Trickle down economy has been proven. It doesn't work. What works is getting people in people's hands or money in people's hands. And that's what's going to change people's life. That's what's going to prevent people from doing different things. And then there's a whole bunch of research that shows people who don't move around as much are much more closed-minded. They're culturally cut off or not as experienced. And so you see that maybe there is a propaganda machine to keep people in their places, you know, keep people in New York, keep people in California, keep people in Perth over, you know, moving to Sydney, keep them in their areas because they won't grow. They won't see anything different. It's kind of like a frog in cold water.
You know what? You're speaking a lot of truth. And I totally agree with that. And yeah, the whole COVID thing, I don't know if you've noticed this. You probably have, but over the course of COVID-19, the actual COVID pandemic, like let's just leave that aside for a moment because I don't think that's the big issue. The big issue is not that there was a virus that like killed people, because there was a virus that killed people. We all know that. We all know that it has killed some people. We may know people who were hurt by it. We may not know people who were. But the death rate in the US stayed pretty consistent over the course of the COVID pandemic. It didn't get higher by that much, which means that the COVID pandemic itself didn't have that much of an impact. The impact was caused by the reaction that governments had to the COVID pandemic. So one example I can think of is in America with the lockdowns that you guys have had that have lasted, in some places, have lasted 6 months or more. And I know that there's places that have been in lockdown and like homeschool and things like that for like a year. It's crazy over there. So I think it's starting to ease up now with the vaccine, but that like youth suicide rates went through the roof in these places that were in lockdown because they couldn't see their friends. They didn't have the daily routine of school, and the school that they did have was terrible because it was on a computer and that was it. And, you know, as we know, as people who believe in how effective it is to have a space like a temple or a chapel that is designated for a specific purpose, a specific spiritual purpose, in the same way, having a designated space for an educational purpose is extremely important. And so anyway, it was a big problem. And I think really that you're right. What we've seen over the course of the last 2 years, over the course of the last year mostly, but over the course of the last 2 years, is the biggest wealth transfer from the lower and middle classes to the upper class and the hyper rich. Yeah. We've seen some, even just someone like Jeff Bezos has gotten so much richer over the course of the COVID pandemic. So we have to ask questions about what the government's actual intention was, considering what the outcome was, and considering that all of the lobbying power considering so much lobbying power comes from the rich and the hyper rich, the amount of money that they put into politics, we have to consider whether maybe the government was acting in their interests on purpose. But this is all speculation, I suppose.
I have a couple thoughts on that. The biggest thing I've seen is the hatred of the everyday family having money. With the whole GameStop, with the meme stop, and I'm pretty into that. I do investing. I've made a couple thousand. I've done well on it. My goal is if I get enough money, I'm buying a helicopter. So a lot of this stuff, I've put time and money. I'm having a guest on talking about financing, so it's something I care about. It's something I wish I knew and did earlier. But seeing the literal mechanism of media intentionally misleading people. Currently one of the other meme stocks is AMC, American Movie. I don't remember what the C is, but they were going up in price, and CNSBC was putting the wrong ticker up intentionally and talking about this ticker as if it was the main one. So they're taking a duck that we should all know be white, and they're showing you a gold one and trying to say that no, this is the right one. And I was like, that is so wrong. And then if you call them out on it, they're going to get mad at you. In fact, I'm not going to name it, but there's a news organization somewhere in New York, one of those, that during the height of the pandemic, it was before, vaccines were talking about, and it was a columnist was talking about there probably won't be a vaccine for COVID. And one of the things they mentioned was for a virus that's primarily prevalent in South America. My wife is from South America. I've been there. I've done research.
Yep.
And one of the things that was an option when I was going there and was on the literal visa paperwork to go to the country was you might want this vaccine. And this news media said that this vaccine doesn't exist. And so I went and linked the actual manufacturer that makes it. And I just basically said, so apparently your editors don't do jack over there. And I got hit with the super spam because they reported me for being a bot. And because the way my account was set up, I couldn't use my US phone number over here to unlock it. So that's how Latter Day Retainer came to be. But there's just a consorted...
That's really horrible. And I have examples from the Australian media as well that I can think of that where similar things happened. I am appalled by some of the things that the Australian media gets away with. We had, so in Australia, our so-called Conservative Party, which is, and this may be why I am so skeptical of just...
Keep talking, I can hear you.
No worries. One of the reasons why I'm probably so skeptical of just free market politics without a social conservative bent is that our free market conservative party is extremely cronyist. They call themselves conservative and right wing, but they are definitely not. They do a lot of moving money around. They do a lot of cutting taxes on big corporations, and they do a lot of cutting spending on things like schools and things like national parks and things like conservation and things like that. Now, for an Australian nationalist, for someone who believes in the Australian nation and in the Australian people, conserving our environment should be one of our top priorities, because we have one of the most biodiverse locations in the entire world just in Western Australia. And we can't afford to be corporatist in regards to conservation, because if we because we're losing so many species every year. We're losing so many species every year that we could lose our biodiversity. And if we lose our biodiversity, we could lose our ecosystems. If we lose our ecosystems, Australia goes goodbye. We don't have Australia anymore. All of our plants become from other countries. All of our animals come from other countries. Conserving Australia means conserving our environment. And the Liberal Party, it's called the Liberal Party, but they're conservative right-wing party. They have consistently cut funding to national parks, which you can show a direct causal connection between that and the bushfires in Victoria. I think it was Victoria, which ended up killing, I think it was over 80% of the koala population in Australia.
Yeah, pretty
So
terrible.
You can show a direct causal link. The media consistently lied about it. We can also show, I think it was in the Murray River. I think it was in the Murray River. We saw the death of, I think, over 100 species of fish or something like that in the Murray River due to a development that was approved by the Liberal government and was funded through tax benefits and things like that to the corporation that was building this particular thing, and it ended up killing off tens of thousands of fish. We had a few species die out because of this. The river itself became toxic, I believe, parts of it. And the media, they didn't just lie about it when they reported it. They mocked it. They made fun of it. It was horrible. They made fun of the idea that like koalas were dying off. It was like, oh, ha, 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 Liberal Party. And then they come up with some way of blaming the Labour Party, which is our kind of people's kind of centre-left party. They come up with ways of blaming them because they refuse to bow down to the corporate interests. And it's just like, oh man, it's just awful. I just hate it so much. It makes me so angry.
I have empathy for you because of my location. I actually get Sky News Australia. A lot of my ads are for Australia. I've actually ordered off of Australia, Amazon and eBay. I've had some friends from Australia. I even know where New Zealand is. I can point to that on a map. So people don't understand how impactful Australia is and the stuff they're doing. There's also a geopolitical stuff I won't get into because of my work, but Australia is important.
Very important.
And then on top of it, you have the Great Barrier Reef, which a lot of people, if you were to ask and do a survey, 10 people in a room, I bet maybe 0 out of 10 would know that it's dying. And
it's very dying. It's not just dying a little bit. It's like it'll be gone in like not long.
Which is sad because there's so much going on. And if you were to
guess whose fault that is? Guess whose fault that is?
Liberal Party. I know.
That's right. It's the conservative government that has been running the country this whole time, and it's the corporations. It's really the corporations are causing the death of the Great Barrier Reef. The Liberal Party refuses to fund conservation in the area, and they refuse to stand up to the corporate interests that are doing it. And so it's just so bad. It's just all money. It's all power. I mean, the one white pill in all of this is that one day soon, I think soonish, Christ is going to come back and he's going to restore the earth to its beauty, and we're going to, But the Great Barrier Reef, it's almost at the point now where it's beyond saving. It's pretty much beyond saving at this point. So it's very sad.
This is why I've become so critical against the scientific community. I can say I'm a scientist, a student scientist, undergrad, getting my degree, literally interdisciplinary science. And I've been really open to seeing some stuff. And with how the media is acting, I don't want to go into it because I don't want this to get flagged too much. But last year, if you were to make a certain connection to a certain research lab in a certain country, you're getting platformed. Now they have literal comedians getting on talk show night hosts talking about, oh yeah, this actually may happen. So now it's fine.
That's the biggest story. That's the biggest story. Like, I don't know about the whole. I don't think where it came from is particularly important to the actual reaction that the government's had, but definitely the fact that they tried to shut you up for saying anything just a year ago. It's like people were fired from their jobs for saying this. Like videos were deleted from YouTube for even implying it. It's like, anyway, I find it is, you have to admit, it is funny how transparent some of this stuff is. So it is funny how transparently fictional some of the narratives are.
So there definitely needs to be a way to peer review. I definitely believe that peer review is good. It's important. You need to have somebody be able to look at what you said and be like, all right, you're definitely smoking some crack here, or you might be onto something, and give you some good feedback, right? You should have somebody within your career field to say, what he's completely wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I feel like there's some value in that. I don't like when you get the scientific community where everyone is saying that if anyone believes this, you're wrong. For instance, in archaeology, if you were to go to India, you'd find out that let me get the name right, there is a continent called Kumarai Kondam. And there's stories where people were talking about, before a great flood, there used to be a civilization over there, and you look over and you see an ocean, and you're like, yeah, he's smoking some crack. And and then some random person
it's like with Book of Mormon archaeology as well. Like there's fairly prominent archaeologists who are members of the church who have what they think are very substantial findings in regards to civilizations in the Americas and what they looked like, and how well they line up with what the Book of Mormon says, and people just refuse to acknowledge it. So
I know Leland. He thinks I like Graham Hancock too much, but I really love Graham Hancock. He's like one of those people I meet.
Yeah.
But I think he's like Donald Trump. If he says something, it's got to be wrong, and it doesn't matter if he's right.
Yep.
because we don't like him and what he has to say. And I really feel like there's certain individuals in career fields that if they found evidence, like for instance, some dude's digging and he finds like a dude named Lehi was here. He had some kids, named, Nephi, Lemuel. He would look and be like, no, I'm burning the crap out of this.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of Leland, Velikovsky was fairly similar, wasn't he? He was completely shunned for the things that he said.
And I'm not a trained physicist or astrophysicist. I've actually had some really strong feelings that I should probably look into it.
But you should definitely, it's like, but you should definitely be able to question certain fundamental assumptions behind what physics is saying.
And just looking into it, you see, if you believe this, you might be a flat earther. And I feel like flat earthers ruined it for everyone else that had any sort of criticism. And it becomes so easy to say, oh, it's not real.
It's like with anything else. It's not like people like flat earthers are always going to exist. Yeah. So there's always going to be the extreme of every issue. The problem isn't actually the flat earthers themselves, I think. The problem is what people do with flat earthers, which is that an example would be, so in the current modern day kind of political landscape, if you say literally anything in regards to think like secret combinations, people in power who may be manipulating money to get what they want politically, you say anything about foreign interest lobbies in America or Australia or anywhere, you say anything about that, and you're instantly branded conspiracy theorist or you're branded QAnon every single time, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, you don't even have to agree with those people to know that what they're doing is they're finding the thing that seems the most ridiculous to the public opinion, and then they're just labeling anyone who disagrees with them that thing in order to discount them. So it's like, okay, so that's a tin hat, that's a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. I don't have to listen to that person. And it happens to me. It actually happens to me in my daily life fairly regularly, as I'll talk to people about these issues, and they just won't be receptive to it. They'll just be like, "Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. There's no truth to that." And what I was going to say about the whole science peer review thing is one example of this that I really care about is pornography, because there is fairly well documented evidence within the field of neuroscience, within the fields of social science, within the field of psychology, that pornography is an addiction that is as powerful, if not more powerful, than a cocaine addiction, and that it reroutes certain centers of your brain to make living a life, specifically a Christian moral life, substantially harder. And there's very, very good evidence for this. And there's evidence that it causes depression. There's like basically a one-to-one correlation that it causes depression, evidence that it causes divorce, evidence that it causes that it, like, the list goes on and on and on. Nevertheless, and the evidence for pornography addiction is fairly overwhelming. There's a lot of it. But despite all of that, there are consistently studies that come out that say pornography addiction doesn't exist and you can do it as much as you want and whatever else. And at a certain point, we know that pornography addiction affects the ability of a person to think about the addiction, because it reroutes a certain part of your head that processes forward thinking, planning, and the outcomes of your actions. So it actually damages that part of your brain. And so people who are addicted to pornography cannot think rationally about pornography or the addiction, which means that, let's say that we go off the statistics that we have, and we say that 80+% of men in America are addicted to pornography. And then we figure out that if we extrapolate that out, that means that 80% of the scientists that are working on these pornography stuff are also addicted to pornography, which then means that their ability to actually rationalize about their addiction is damaged. And so, of course, their findings are going to be biased, their abstracts are going to be biased, and their the way that they look at the data that they've got is going to be biased. And also the way that they actually peer review something is going to be biased as well. And so, yeah, I just don't like. And so, in that regard, at a certain point, I don't trust anyone who is a scientist who claims that pornography is not an addiction, because that to me shows a bias that they're not aware of and they're not willing to take into account when they're doing their work. And so I definitely see that all the time. And so that was the thing that made me stop taking science as seriously, is the amount of bias that we see in that particular field. So
I grew up really admiring scientists. I wanted to be one. Currently trying to pursue that in my own endeavors. I loved Bill Nye the Science Guy, a whole bunch of other, obscure 90s stuff. I've really been fascinating. I remember it was like one birthday, my mom was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want that book by Stephen Hawking's." And she was like, "What?" And she was like, "What kind of crap are you doing in your room?" I'm really interested in it. And then being in our church,
to be clear, I love science, but
and seeing it, it's really sad to see when there's a thought that if you say anything counter to it, you're automatically wrong. And eventually enough people jump on that train and you're forever blacked. That's why I love Graham Hancock right now. He's open about doing ayahuasca. He's open about some of these more ideas. He's kind of like killed his scholarship credibility. But he's like, they've already done that to me. And seeing some of the other stuff that's going on. I remember reading a paper for 3 classes ago. I was like, this can't be real. I just came across it. It was about jumping out of a plane without a parachute and how you would survive. And I was like, this is interesting. And it was peer reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say around 20 plus peer reviews.
Yep.
You get to the very end and it's pretty much ends with, and this is why it's important to read a paper all the way, because you never know what it is.
Yes.
And it was a meme. It was a meme paper that they did, and it was a social science project within the peer review research community. And that's why it's important, because if you take something like jumping out of an airplane and putting out there and you make it scientific fact, it's obviously, there's statistics of where people do survive. It happens. Fluke, nature, God liked them a lot, right? Most people are going to die when they jump out of an airplane without a parachute. And so that's why you need to be critical of things that are new, but you don't need to be so critical that it becomes so taboo. Like, people are so afraid to mention aliens that anything that looks something alien-like, you just get a physicist named Avi Loeb mentioned, well, we could think it's extraterrestrial trash. And the physics community went like back, resource, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, went ridiculously insane and crazy, and just like all these people were jumping on in the physics community saying he has no right to say that. And it's like, as a scientist, you have to be open up to every possibility, because all science should say is this is what we found and this is what we think it means. And when you put it up on this podium stool, I love when you get into an argument with a physicist who believes in multidimensional theory or string theory or boson brain, or this is a simulation, and then you're like, yeah, I'm religious, I believe in Jesus Christ, and they're like, oh, you're retarded. I was like, do you not hear yourself?
Like anything's possible. Anything's possible unless it's God. I actually have something to say about that. So
you look excited.
The first thing I was going to say is that when I was an atheist, I loved science and I wanted to do evolutionary biology was what I wanted to do. I kind of fell out of love with it towards the end of high school, and I got more into kind of psychology and anthropology and stuff like that. But I would never do those at university, so I ended up just going and doing music. But I wanted to say about, one of the things that really was always present in my mind when I was investigating the church, and I think probably had a big thing to do with my conversion, was I love H.P. Lovecraft. He's a American horror writer from I think New England.
Yep.
He's absolutely fantastic, and I love his work. And I have his complete works in this like silk bound book, and I read it to my wife. Like, I love it. I think it's great.
He,
It's my favorite, literally the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft's my favorite book beside scripture. I absolutely love it. But I always had this thought, because H.P. Lovecraft writes a lot about cosmic horror, which is the idea of gods, like aliens that are like these greater beings, these kind of godlike beings that exist with way more power and knowledge than we can possibly comprehend, but they're evil, right? That's what he writes about. And so it's like a scary kind of, these beings arrive on planet Earth, and it's like, what can you actually do with that? It's a completely hopeless kind of nihilistic way of viewing the universe. And H.P. Lovecraft was an agoraphobe. He was terrified of everything. So it's not surprising that that's the sort of fiction he gravitated to writing. But he had this feeling, and I got this feeling from his work, that it's not impossible that all of this stuff could be true. Because how would you know that it wasn't true? Whether it was true or whether it wasn't true, the universe would be the same way, because it kind of exists outside of our sphere. It exists outside of our sphere of influence. So it was like, I had this idea of, because science can't test it and we can't see it, just because we can't test it or see it doesn't mean it's not there. So I used to say, when I was an atheist, I was like, look, I'm open to the idea that things exist outside of our plane and outside of what we can experience, that we may one day be able to experience, or that we may somehow be able to experience, which is why I'm not totally convinced on the topic of ayahuasca and stuff like that. So that's what I would say to myself. And then it was funny because when I was thinking about joining the church, I was like, why would I make the assumption that things that are like outside of the universe or outside of our comprehension, that have this amazing amount of knowledge, and they're physical beings, and they know so much and they have so much power, why would I assume that they're malicious? Isn't it also possible, if it's possible that something like that exists, if it's possible that anything exists outside of our knowledge, wouldn't it make more logical sense that the thing that would have more power and more knowledge, that would be outside of what we have experienced with science, would be something that is fairly benevolent, because it knows how to operate in the universe better than just an average human being, right? So when I made that realization, I realized that, it's actually entirely possible for there to be things that exist outside of the realm of science, that science can test, that's still there, right? And the funny thing is that is one thing that atheists will never want to admit, is that there's something out there, that there could be something outside of the universe that science can't test. And whether or not science could test it, it would still be there. And the reason why they don't want to admit that is because it means they won't be able to tell whether hell exists or not, right? And because the Christian conception of hell is very kind of, you don't believe in God, okay, hell for eternity kind of thing. It makes them very scared to even give the possibility that exists. Because if that possibility is even allowed to be discussed, then that brings in the possibility that that if they're wrong about all of it, they're going to a bad place. And if they're going to a bad place, then they've been wrong about everything in their lives, and they have suffering awaiting them. And they don't want to think about that. They don't want to talk about that. So they're like, no, it's not even possible that anything exists outside of science. And you hear Richard Dawkins talk like this all the time, because I got really into Richard Dawkins in high school, where he'll say, like, for people who don't know who Richard Dawkins is, he's like a British new atheist. He hates religion. But he would say, like, he would say something like, someone would ask him, you keep asking for evidence. You keep saying there's no evidence for God. Well, what evidence would you want to be convinced? And I have come to believe that is the best question you can ask an atheist, because they never have an answer, right? So he said, there is nothing that could convince me. There is nothing that could convince me, because even if the Lord himself appeared to me, it's entirely likely it's a delusion, or it's hypnosis, or I just am schizophrenic or something like that. I'm having some kind of mental breakdown. So he's like, look, even if that's the case, I wouldn't believe it. And I'm like, see, at that point, it's willful. It's like willfully blind. You're willfully not it's not that it's not there and therefore you don't believe it. It's that even if it was there, you would never know. It's like there is actually no way for you to know, because even if an angel appeared to you, you wouldn't accept it. Yeah.
I think why Lovecraft's work is so scary and why we're so fearful of aliens is more of a self-reflection of ourselves, and the realization if there's somebody more advanced than us, that's terrifying, because we're the ones who, if you look at it, we've maxed out. There's no other creature on Earth that we really fear. For the most part, we can deal with wildlife. It's other humans. We're at the top of the totem pole. There's nothing that's going to topple us. But that's why the fear of aliens is so strong, and there's so much media about, when Mars and the world the Worlds at War originally aired, it caused literal panic because they thought it was happening.
Well, that's right, because there's something
they missed that intro.
Something Lovecraft always says is, something that is always quoted that he said is, the oldest and strongest kind of emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. And to an extent, that's true. The fear of the unknown is actually what drives human ingenuity. It's what drives human dominion. It's what drives us to push onwards into the light instead of falling into outer darkness. And aliens are very unknown. We don't really know what they are. It's not just like, an elephant or a tiger, which are kind of weird and dangerous, right? But we understand them because they're from Earth and we've had to deal with them our entire lives. But the idea that there's something that's shapeless or formless or completely outside of what we understand, Call of Cthulhu comes to mind as an absolutely fantastic story, right? The idea that there's something outside of our comprehension. We don't know what it's made of. We don't know how it thinks. We don't know what it does or what its purpose is or even what its motivations are. And it just exists, and it sees humans as like a mosquito on its back, and it just wants to wipe us out, right? That is terrifying because there's nothing you can do to stop that, and it's completely and utterly unknown. So yeah, I honestly think Lovecraft was a bit of a genius, if a very tormented one. But he was obviously a very smart man. He was just very fearful, very, very fearful, obviously struggled with various mental health problems. But he has a way of capturing human emotion and human fear. And yeah, I just love his way of writing as well. He's
actually influenced a lot of exotheology, so study of possible alien religions. I have a thought that I'm working on for the blog portion. I've just been sidetracked with my classes right now. And kind of doing other stuff, but it's just amazing. I've thought about it. I don't care. When I was younger in Colorado, I saw, quote, Bigfoot. Whether it was a bear or whatever, I had 3 friends next to it. It broke off tree branches and threw it at us, right? We were terrified for weeks.
Yeah.
It could be a bear. I don't know.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool.
That's freaking Bigfoot. And to this day, I'm 31 years old, and I can't sleep with a window without a curtain or something covering it. I am absolutely terrified because one day I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a face staring through. And I was like, and I had to get out of the room. I was absolutely terrified. There was a print of something, a smear that wasn't there, and there was stuff that showed that something was standing in my room or outside my room, 13 feet off the ground, and was looking in.
Whoa.
So, fast forward.
That's crazy to me. I love that kind of stuff. I don't have any experience with it, but with like but what's the term for that? Cryptozoology.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff, but it's very scary. Very, very scary.
So I could have been wrong. It could have been a bear, a grizzly. They go through Colorado. At the time, there was a one that was being hunted by the park rangers because it had killed a guy. By the time they killed it, he had like 92 bullets throughout his entire body. Huge bear, 2,000 pounder. It could have been a bear, right? But when I tell that story and I ask an atheist, I have seen Bigfoot and I have seen God. Which one do you think they're going to believe?
Yeah.
It's going to be the Bigfoot, because the idea that there's an omnipotent being that is beyond our understanding and comprehension is so absolutely terrifying. It hurts the human mind. You talk about how Richard Dawkins, or you're kind of coming off of that, but you mentioned how atheists fear literal hell. For anybody who's not familiar with Islamic theology, you don't want to go to Islamic hell.
No.
You have boiling water poured down your throat.
It's very bad.
You have an individual angel assigned to your eternal torture for not being a slave to Allah. We're very light-ended on that. And so when you have those kind of thoughts, we don't really know. But at the same time, science says there's other dimensions. But also at the same time, science says there can't be a God, which, science can't prove. And what got me on the rant was the Christian church really didn't like the Copernican model, because not that it meant that there was other worlds out there. The idea that they struggled with the most was, how did Christ save every single one of them?
Yep.
Was there multiple Christs? And this is why this dude was burned at the stake. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But it's the idea that it makes society so scared of the real possibility of what's out there. It's insane. Like, if a literal alien civilization were to show up, whether it's from another dimension or they have advanced technologies and they beat the Fermi's paradox and they were able to come here and interact with us, there's going to be a huge upset. And I feel like people aren't going to be able to handle that, because if you can't handle a person on Twitter, saying looking at porn is bad, you're definitely not going to be able to handle it when an intergalactic civilization shows up and they're like, we're tired of your crap. And there's going to be people,
or when Christ comes back.
Well, yeah.
Which is basically the same thing, but yeah.
What's interesting is in Islamic theology, I don't know if you saw my tweet on that before they believe in the Antichrist is called the Dajjal. And he's going to be shown how to do magic, and he's going to mislead people after a great time of war, to where people literally believe that he's this great savior, and he's going to slowly transition to, I am the Messiah.
Well, I think Leland talks about stuff like that as well, about like a fake second coming happening before the real second coming happens, as like one of the things that happens in the last days. Now, I don't really know much about it, but have you heard of Project Bluebeam?
Mostly from what Leland mentioned.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting it from as well. Because I mean, I have heard of it on, like, because I watch a lot of different political stuff, so I've heard about it on Alex Jones and things like that, but I had never really looked into it. And then I heard Leland mention it, and I was like, oh, that's so crazy, man. It's like, that's the sort of thing that keeps me awake at night.
I wouldn't put it past him. This is why I really hate when people are like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. I learned about the Tuskegee trials being in Tuskegee and seeing it firsthand, generational effects that happened. Or the Iran-Contra conspiracy, where the CIA said, why don't we create chaos in South America to fund more money to go fight Iran? Like, what? Or the fact that
the CIA is scary.
JFK has a general brief him that, yes, we want to shoot down a plane full of Americans. Excuse me?
Yeah.
Like it's insane.
And it's funny how you mentioned JFK earlier as well, because I believe that the CIA had something to do with JFK. But I wouldn't. All I'm saying is I wouldn't put it past them. That's all I'm saying.
There's a TikTok video that I laughed really hard, and it shows a woman holding a camera, and the caption over her head is the Discovery Channel's Baby Seal film crew. And then around the other corner, you see somebody else with the camera, and it was like the killer whale documentary crew.
Yeah.
And so, like, at JFK, there was probably the FBI guy looking across the street and seeing the CIA guy going, huh. Which is funny is there's actually a comic that does a really good play on that called The Umbrella Academy, about the JFK assassination. Is pretty
I'd like to read Umbrella. I'd like to read Umbrella Academy, because My Chemical Romance is one of my favorite bands. So
yeah, the group thing, that's why I really hate groupthink, and it's kind of hypocritical, but it's in our nature to be tribal and to be a part of things and to put names in front of ourselves. But it's just sad.
Natural. Actually, it's another example of gospel, like something that is meant to be there for the gospel being twisted to serve Babylon. It's like, well, and just to serve the carnal man. It's like, having a tribal nature is what makes us want to have eternal families. It's what makes us want to come to church every week. It's, what makes us want to be part of an elders quorum and relief society and things like that. But it does also mean that we are susceptible to that being used against us.
So I've given up with I don't care if I'm labeled a conspiracy theorist, because there's so many literal instances where people played their cards wrong and they got caught. And so I'm okay with being, labeled that.
Yep.
And then I'm okay with being labeled I'm anti-science, because I'm hypercritical. I'm not hypocritical. I'm hypercritical of the scientific community, and I feel as what they're doing is making it harder, right? When you get a Pew Research poll that goes and looks around the U.S., and I want to say they actually did Australia and the U.K. about how well do you believe in science, and you see this anti-sentiment towards science. Well, at the same time, you go through this thing of a world catastrophe, and now you get these scientific organizations backflipping. I literally got banned from a subreddit because I called out the fact that the WHO, the World Health Organization, is not science. It's an organization. Science is indivisible to anybody. Nobody can own science. It exists, whether you like it or not. It's an eternal truth. And this PhD banned me because I asked him, hey, question, what school did you get your postdoctorate at? Or where did you get your postdoctorate at? And he asked, and I said, because clearly they're not worth the time and money if that's where you went. If you think that I can't be critical of an organization. And it's really sad.
Yeah, that reminds me of something Mike Winger said. Mike Winger is like a Protestant theologian, and I quite like his videos and stuff. His stuff on LDS theology is obviously terrible, but his stuff on just Christian apologetics and things like that's quite good. He had a point that he made, which was a lot of atheists personify science, which is really interesting. They'll say things like, science is always doubting itself. Science is always trying to find the truth. And science is never dogmatic, or science is whatever. And it's like, you're literally just applying descriptors that you would normally use. You're basically describing yourself. You're describing yourself, but you're saying science, which I thought was really funny, because that is basically what it's like. It's like,
So
anyway,
I'm not bought entirely on, we've dotted around Leland, but I'm not entirely bought on the electric universe. I really feel like trying to comprehend God is like an ant trying to comprehend me about to step on it. You can't. It's beyond our comprehension.
I feel kind of similarly. I have yet to do the reading on it. I need to read Anthony Larson's book, and then I'm going to go in and read some Velikovsky and some other people. Because I was talking to Leland about it, and I think I told him, I was like, look, at the moment, I'm kind of on the fence on it. I don't really know what I think about it, because it is hard. It is hard for me to look past consensus. Like when the consensus is so strong on something, it's hard for me to look past it. But I did say, look, but my faith is in the scriptures and in God first. So if I am proved wrong on this and it is actually the nature of everything, look, that's fine. But I do also agree with you that there is an extent to which I think even if Electric Universe was closer to the truth than our current model, that doesn't mean that it's 100% correct. Like it's almost definitely the case that we can't actually describe the nature of God or his work because we're humans and we're mortal and we can't really understand it.
And as Stephen Wolfram put it out, it's very likely that when we do come across an alien civilization, that their thinking and understanding of physics and mathematics is going to be completely, I hate to use the word alien, but we're not going to recognize it because we stumbled upon something and it works. I'm not a science denier because you can look and engineer and build something that sends stuff into space, right? There's mathematics and stuff that works. But at the same time, I'm pragmatic. I don't have the understanding to examine Electric Universe as a physicist would. But at the same time, I'm open to the idea that it's a possibility. The fact that when they found that the Voyagers were entering plasmatic clouds, which accordingly, science said that can't happen. There would no reason for plasma to be out there. Or now they're making connections that all the universe is connected through the different solar systems and galaxies through a plasmanized web of sorts. It's really interesting when you look at that, but still being open and pragmatic to it. But if you were to go to any major, natural or science or research gate and start researching that, you see people saying there's no way that this could be true. But then looking at our current situation, like we mentioned earlier, all of a sudden you got people, backspinning and saying, oh, no, actually it can be right. So that's when I get mad at science when it says that. Like the fact that there's I can't remember the two archaeologists. They basically said a whole bunch of texts say there's a library under the Sphinx. We're going to use LiDAR, and they proved it. The Egyptian government was so mad they permanently banned them and their children from ever entering Egypt again.
Wow.
You can't tell me that that's not covering it up, right?
That's
Graham
crazy.
Hancock made it.
There's lots of examples of that.
You can't be doing that. You can't be a scientist getting so mad at somebody being right that you start burning evidence against them. That's not good, right? Because that's the thing. I really feel like people have come across stuff and it's just like, oh, that doesn't feel well. I better get rid of it. And it's really sad.
Yeah. We see it a lot in archaeology with Book of Abraham stuff as well. That one thing. My brother's a non-member, and he's been investigating the church for about a year. And I've only been in the church for 2 years, so he's been investigating for like half of the time that I have been in the church. But he's very skeptical of things like the Book of Abraham, just because of how much the consensus is quote unquote against us, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is that the consensus it's not against us because there's no evidence. It's not against us because there's no justifications for certain lack of evidences or justifications for certain evidences that seem to not line up with our theory. It's that every piece of evidence that is raised is squashed by those who don't want it to be true, who have a preconception on how the world operates and how the universe operates. And the idea that Joseph Smith somehow stumbled upon a real historical text and translated it, even through secular means, like you don't have to be a member of the church to believe that. But the idea that even he didn't lie about that is enough that they're just like, no, we can't. Like, it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean Hugh Nibley spoke about the symbol of the lotus to mean, a foreigner in a foreigner in a foreign land kind of thing? It's like, no, like you can't bring that up. That's got nothing to do with it. It's like, no, it's actually quite important because it indicates that it actually has like Egyptian origin. But anyway, it's like, it's just, It's a thing. It tends to happen with a lot of things. I was also thinking about the kind of, I think the Chinese temples. There's quite a few Chinese temples that the Chinese government won't let anyone look at. Tibetan temples as well that the Chinese government refuses to let anyone look at. So
yeah, the Chinese official religion is China, so anything that doesn't
True.
fit that narrative, it doesn't do well, and you get disappeared.
Yep.
Something I was thinking about was a person I respect very much in LDS apologetics and has written extensively and is well liked in scholarship and is professionally acclaimed. They joked that there is no university in the world that makes more atheists than a theological one. Because when you start truly studying stuff, it gets insane. Like, I don't wonder how many people understand that there's a large body of evidence that shows that the Abrahamic religion of the Jews was picked up from pre-Egypt life, or that
Yes.
a lot of the religious tradition shows that whenever the Jewish people went to a new place, they kind of absorbed those practices.
Well, that's the consensus. I'm not sure how much I believe that, but that is the consensus. Yeah.
Breakfast for Religion on YouTube has a wonderful channel. He's a PhD. He works with a whole bunch of other people, like let's study religion and charts and flows. And he has some pretty crazy videos. One recently I watched was there was a temple that was destroyed because the southern Jews didn't like that the northern Jews weren't using Solomon's temple. And in this temple, there was two pillars. And he started talking about how in this pillar, one was for Jehovah and one was for
Asherah.
Asheroth, right? And he
Asherah.
started talking about how the northern Jewish tribes prescribed that Jehovah had a wife. And it's just insane that there's no way that would work. Or the fact...
So that's something Margaret Barker talks about a lot, because she basically believes that the second Jewish temple after the Temple of Solomon, that basically after all of the temples were wiped and destroyed in that kind of theological battle that they had in the Jewish religion, that the temples that were built after that were apostate temples. And she does a lot of talks at Fair Mormon and stuff like that. I mean, she's a Methodist, but she gets invited to our talks because you can imagine members of the church are very interested in the idea of Jehovah having a wife and in the idea of like a mother goddess. Now, it's very, very interesting because it's the sort of thing that a lot of specifically like evangelical non-denominational Protestants kind of really don't know about. And if they did, it'd probably challenge their view of what Christianity is supposed to be and what like Judaism was, ancient Judaism was, because here's one interesting view is that it's fairly reasonable, right? That Nephi, coming from the Jewish religion, when he asked, what is the nature of the tree of life? And then he was shown a woman, and then he just went, oh, okay, cool, I got that. Great. That makes sense. It's like, who has that reaction when they're shown that, when they're shown a tree and they're like, what does the tree mean? And then they are shown a woman. Who actually understands that, right? But in the Jewish temple, the symbol of Asherah was a woman with the base of a tree. So it was like from the legs down, she was a tree, and from the torso up, she was a woman. And so to him, that just made sense. It was just a Jewish image that he probably was familiar with culturally. Even if he didn't believe in that particular deity, he would have been familiar with the imagery. And so for him, that vision made sense. And I just find that really fun. It's like there's so many examples of, first of all, LDS religion, like Joseph Smith, Church of Jesus Christ theology being verified by these kinds of findings in ancient Judaism and explained by it, but also things within the actual Bible itself that are actually proven and given much more veracity because of ancient Jewish writings and because of things that happened in ancient Judaism. And so, yeah, I think it's evidence that it's actually evidence of a point that I think is basically the point of this whole discussion that we've had, which is that you can't just take information from a single source and say that you know everything or that you've got all of the information. You can't just take information from science. You can't just take information from, Bible schools or whatever. You need to actually read from various sources in regards to things, because often the consensus is wrong. Often I think fairly regularly the mainstream Christian religions are wrong. And so and if you want to be really right about things, then you have to be willing to look into things that maybe you're not comfortable with thinking about. And saints need to do that as well. Saints need to do that as well. Not with everything. There are some things that you should be fairly comfortable with not questioning, but there are some things that saints really need to begin to take a second look at. So
for me, something that is kind of been kind of a world shift. So world shift basically means something you've experienced a new thing, whatever it is, that changes the way you see the world. And recently, my world shift has been how Islamophobic Western and Christianity is, and how much we are kind of hurting ourselves under the understanding and what people think Islam is. And to be honest, I've actually quite struggled with my faith because I've disliked the Bible, especially with how much contention it caused, all these church shifting. The reason why I'm still a member of the church is the Book of Mormon, there's too much to it to make sense. As a writer, there's no way one dude did this. That 20 years, 200 years down the road, new science and archaeology is coming out and discovering something. And guess what? There's a little bit of it in the Book of Mormon. How did somebody do that in the 1800s in a revivalist movement? It doesn't make sense. But the Quran has a lot of information. And even in that, studying Islam, it's pretty interesting what's going on. Recently, I did the comparison between the Book of Mormon and the Quran. Why was Muhammad, peace be upon him, so concerned about the Jews? Why was he caring about the Jews and Christians in a predominantly pagan area of Saudi Arabia? Because there was Christians living there. There was Jews living there in their own practices, and they were doing their own thing. And so in response, he came about and felt so strongly that the Jews and Christians had gone so completely and utterly astray of the religion that he was setting them back on the right path.
Yeah, and you're probably aware that Daniel Peterson is an Islamologist, and he loves the Prophet Muhammad, and he would say he said from time to time, he flip-flops on it a bit, but he has said that he thinks Muhammad was probably a prophet who then fell or had some kind of went through some kind of sin-related thing where he stopped being called as a prophet or something like that. But I'm not closed off to that idea. Actually, someone who you would probably like to talk to as well, if you want to get in contact with him, is King Benjamin. He is just a young guy. He's like 16, 17.
I really like his content.
But yeah, he and I disagree with him on literally like 80% of the stuff he posts. But he's very open-minded in regards to things like Islam. I mean, you can even, like, I used to hate Islam as an atheist. In my view, it was the worst religion, right? Because of what we were seeing around the world. It was the one that was the most tyrannical, the most brutal, and things like that. Now, the actual reasons behind why it's like that in the modern age is somewhat to do with what's written in the Quran. It's somewhat to do with what's written in the Hadith, but a lot of it is cultural and a lot of it is sociocultural. And the truth is that if we were alive in the time of the Islamic Golden Age, then I think people would be a lot, especially Christians, would be a lot, like modern enlightened Christians would be much less angry at Islam and much more pro-Islam being as a religion. But the problem is the way that the Islamic world acts in the modern day, which is generally not very nice. But that said, the Islamic Golden Age showed that there was potential for the Islamic religion to do a great deal of good. And I know some Muslims in my life who are very, very nice people. And so I think that, honestly, and we're getting, I'll probably end on this because we're getting close to time up. But I will end on this and say that at the end of the day, the thing that is the most important for living a good moral life is believing in God. And I say that knowing that there are atheists who are going to find that very offensive. But I would say that if you're an atheist who lives a moral life, you believe in God, whether or not you want to admit it. So I believe that the most important thing for living a happy, meaningful, moral life is to believe in God, any God. But I think the most true God and the God that will provide the most meaning, happiness, and morality to your life is Jesus Christ of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But that doesn't mean that all the other churches are wrong, because they're not. They're not wrong. They're actually more right they're more right than they are wrong. Even Buddhism, I've been looking a little bit into Buddhism. Buddhism's pretty awesome, and so is Hinduism. World religions in general contain a great deal of truth. It's just that you actually need some of that transcendent truth. You need some of it in order to live a moral life, and which is why, here's the other thing, right? Atheists are often religious or theistic about certain things. Atheists will religiously watch superhero movies. They will religiously watch Star Wars. They will, religiously watch Lord of the Rings. A lot of atheists will get super nerdy about politics, or they'll you see, literally, you want to see evidence that if you remove God from something, you start finding God in politics and various other places. Almost all white nationalists and Nazis are atheistic. And it's like, okay, well, why? Well, it's because, first of all, it's very hard for a Christian to be a white nationalist or a Nazi because you see human beings as inherently valuable, right? Which means that racism is actually very hard to believe if you're a Christian. But if you're an atheist, it becomes very, very easy because first of all, you don't have to see everyone as inherently valuable, but also it becomes its own kind of religion. It has its own mythology associated with it. You start becoming obsessed with things like paganism and the soul of the white race and things like that. Honestly, the best thing you can do to lead, if you're really concerned about right-wing extremism, if you're really concerned about conspiracy theorists, if you're really concerned about these people, the best thing you can do is encourage them to find God and encourage them to find an actual healthy religion that will have them being a benefit to their society instead of someone who's going to try and destroy the society because of some misplaced sense of moral judgment. So that's how I'll end, is just saying,
okay.
If anyone's listening who doesn't believe in God, you should believe in God because it's pretty based and it's pretty cool. And everyone who believes in God is happy. So,
yeah, I know.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
I'm being partly facetious, obviously. But
I want to kind of comment off what you said, and we can just end there because I know you got to get going soon. But something I'm just sad to see is when members are just like, oh, Muhammad was the devil appeared to him and did that. But if you really look at it, the similarities between Joseph Smith and Muhammad are really there. And I'm so surprised that we don't see anti-Mormon literature literally saying that Joseph Smith copied Muhammad in a lot of what he did. And now that I said that, I'm probably going to see it on my Facebook page. But something that I really feel that he was, Joseph Smith himself and several prominent leaders of the church, prophets and apostles have claimed that Muhammad did that. I really feel what happened to what he was revealed, experienced apostasy, and the fact that, a full pious Muslim is not going to like the fact that the Quran wasn't assembled right away. And there was people who were putting their hands in the pot. And anytime that happens, it's never a good thing. Just kind of like, the victor writes the spoils. The fact that there's hadiths, right? And there's so much. I really feel for a faithful Muslim who struggles with the question, because you've got to examine your school of thought. You have to have context. What do the hadith say? What does the sunnah on the Prophet's life say? And all this different stuff. But like you were talking about, really becoming a good person, that's really the Quran literally says that. So for all those terrorists killing people, it says it's wrong. For all those people in Africa, like in General Conference, they talked about the family had militant Muslims saying that if you don't convert to Islam, we'll kill you. And in the Quran, those dudes go to hell. So it's really sad seeing a religion just be ostracized by the bad apples. It's kind of like if people judge Christianity by the dudes who blow up Planned Parenthood. I would feel sad about that too. And then in looking at that, like, I feel everyone could be better by learning about other people's faiths, and you can really kind of see where you're at. And that's why I'm studying it. It's very interesting. And then you get a bigger perspective. I've found some things in the Quran that I'm like, holy crap, that's in the temple ceiling. Or that if we could see how much love God has for us and all the times that he's revealed his truth of how to live a life to return back to him, we would utterly fall and prostrate and ask for forgiveness of being unfaithful, because all the religions revealed that do good things are of him. And so anytime that we do anything that discredits that, it's kind of wrong. There's beautiful tenets of obviously Satanism and stuff, that's not right. But for, Christians, Jews, Muslims, a faithful Buddhist, we can all be better, like you said.
Well, and that's true. And while, yes, there are some religions that I think your life would be worse than being an atheist, examples being Satanism or Scientology or things like that. But I do think that they still have truth in them. Otherwise, no one would believe them. Like Satanism, they're right that Satan exists. Like they have that going for them, The Scientologists, it's like they're right that you should try and improve yourself. You should try and make yourself better. So they're right about that. It's just that there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with it that are extremely damaging. But that's beside the point, I suppose.
And then something that's helped me is I keep hearing, was it President Nelson 3 conferences ago that said we can't survive the coming days without revelation?
Yep.
I am learning that firsthand.
Yes.
But
yes.
That's something I feel like we could end on. If you get anything out of this, whether it's conspiracy theories or studying religion or examining science, and ask God, James 1:5.
And then read scripture for the answer. Read scripture every single day.
And you can do that. As a missionary, we would eat breakfast and read scripture, because that was 10 more minutes that we got towards studying. We were literally reading all the time. That's also why I'm sick of the Bible, because I feel like I've read it enough. But I haven't
read it. I haven't read it through yet. So that's on my next to-do list after the Pearl of Great Price, is to read the whole Bible all the way through.
I would do that, and then afterwards read it chronologically and read the pairing, because a good portion of the Bible, a lot of the books are just repeat different views and visions. So like Leviticus and Deuteronomy are pretty much like the same thing. So like reading those back to back, if I remember right, and if you have a quad, it'll actually show you how to read those like side by side, so you can get like that. Like the book of Genesis is actually 2 books in one if you read it, and that's why there's so much confusion. So but it's worthwhile. I feel like you're going to get a lot out of it, and you're like, wait a minute, and you're going to flip over the Book of Mormon.
Because I joined the church having read the Book of Mormon, and then I read Doctrines, and I'm almost finished Doctrines and Covenants. I've been reading Doctrines and Covenants ever since. I'm almost finished Doctrines and Covenants. Then I'm going to go Pearl of Great Price, then the whole Bible, and then start again. So we'll see how everything's going to compare, because I'm going to be going straight from the Bible to the Book of Mormon. So I'll be able to have it fresh in my mind while I'm reading the Book of Mormon. It'll be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. But anyway, we'll end on that. It's been great talking to you.
It's been good one, Peregrine. We got to do this again if you're open to it. So
yeah, absolutely. I love chatting, and you've been a great host.
And we kind of cleared some of the smoke from our Twitter battles. So no harm.
Yeah. I think we agree on more than what we disagree on. And it's literally just small political things. It's like, I just think that the government should have more of a role in making society moral, and you don't think that the government should have that big of a role. So, and that's just a really minor thing. That's just such a small thing. But
and for those listening, that just shows you that to really understand somebody, you have to have a conversation with them, and probably doing it over 270 characters isn't there. So, you know, if there's something
I was amazed. Yeah, I was amazed by how much we agree, because I find it hard to find people that I agree with this much. In my everyday life on Twitter, it's really hard to find people who agree with me this much. So it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah, we'll do this again. Have fun. Enjoy your evening. Give my thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Spiritual Danger close.